followed by a series of 8% adjustments and then dropping to 6. If there were no grants available, then it would be 3 years at about 10%, dropping to 8%. They've also calculated a gap revenue adjustment, which would mean if we got to February and we were trying to enact rates, if no supplemental supply was being developed at that time, we had kind of a delay in that work, we could enact a gap rate rather than going for the full rate increase. So that's where they've kind of wound up on their finance plan scenarios. So now that we kind of know what those revenue needs are going to be over the next 5 years, then they kind of move to this cost of service allocation, where they take the cost to provide service, because we're a not-for-profit government agency, our revenue need is our cost of service. So then they take those costs of service and they put them into different cost components. And some of those cost components, when we're talking about an inclining tiered rate structure, some of those cost components deal primarily with the volumetric rate, and the others deal with the fixed service charge. So they were able to allocate those cost of service components. There's the production, there's delivery. On the variable side, you've got production, delivery, and water reliability. Then on the fixed side, you've got your peaking behaviors, fire protection costs, and then the maintenance of your meters and your customer costs. And those kind of inform that fixed component. The other three inform the variable component of an inclining tiered structure.
I think the word delivery better than base. Base to me doesn't mean much.
Much of anything, and I think, did he use it?
What word did you use?
Second one there, base.
Base delivery, he
Okay.
did use it here.
So Sanjay made these slides, is that?
And actually, I
Yeah.
think I mimight be able
These
to.
are from Ralph Tellis.
He gave me his
Working copy.
working copy, maybe he shouldn't have done that. So then we kind of get to the point where then we have to take those cost components, allocate them to the different customer classes, and come up with rates. So that's kind of where they stand right now. And we're looking at a few different rate options. One of them is the inclining tiered, which we already have used in the past, and the other one that we looked at was CustomerSelect. The recommendations that we're making on the fixed service charges, now this exercise that they've gone through here does not include any of the projected increase in revenue need. This is just taking the same cost components that are in our current rate structure and applying them to their modifications to see what those comparisons would be.
It's a way
So,
to compare apples to apples.
It's just a way to
without
compare
the
apples to
increase,
apples
yeah.
without putting that revenue need on top of it yet. Because they just wanted to see, they're making some changes to the inclining tiered structure.
Mhm.
In the past, we were getting about 36% of our revenue from the fixed charge, and the remaining 67% was coming from the, actually I guess it was 33 and 67.
Mhm.
So 33 from fixed and 67 from the volumetric charge. What we're recommending now is 40% from the fixed charge and 60% from the volumetric.
So
And-
that's regardless of CustomerSelect or anything else, you just.
Yeah, this is
you
just
want
for
to
the
change-
inclining
To
tier.
better reflect the infrastructure.
Right, just to smooth out that revenue stability.
And does that include, if you do the supplemental supply, do you include the beginning of the amortization of that, of the infrastructure requirements for whatever supplemental supply? you get?
Right, our debt service obligations, amortization of debt service would
But
be.
not the capital amortization.
Well, yeah, no, that's included in it, but that's, depreciation is kind of a
Depreciation.
non-cash
Yeah,
item,
yeah, just-
yeah. So, when they looked at customer peaking behavior, this is a little bit different from what they've noticed in the past. And I don't know if it's because of the drought that we saw that shift in behavior a little bit. But all of a sudden, the single-family, multifamily, and commercial classes are exhibiting very similar peaking behaviors. In the past, there was more differentiation between those three customer classes. And now they're all showing very similar peak behaviors in terms of peak day and peak demand.
So peaking in, even as being summer versus winter.
Right.
and that type of-
Yeah, yeah.
Less
very much.
outdoor irrigation, probably something like that.
So they saw that kind of flattening among those three customer classes. So they're proposing that those three customer classes receive similar service charges. The one that's showing a different type of peaking behavior is actually the irrigation and outdoor use class, because they do exhibit that high peaking
Well,
behavior in the
that's a
summer.
whole, yeah,
Yeah.
they're like off, they're from a different planet.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So what they're proposing is that we look at single-family, multifamily, and commercial as similar peaking patterns. And then the outlier is kind of the irrigation outdoor use. So when you devise fixed surface charges for each of those customer classes, they would be the same for all three customer classes, and they would be higher for irrigation, because you're capturing more of those peaking costs.
Why is commercial going down?
Well, because in the past, we saw commercial peaking more in the summertime than we're currently seeing them. And I don't know if that's kind of the economy is doing better, and so you've got year-round tourism.
Say it again, commercial is not peaking as much as they used to?
They're not peaking as
That's
much as they
conservation.
used
You
to.
don't see water fountains at shopping centers anymore, you don't see,
Well,
you don't see lawns in front of commercial buildings, that's all gone.
that could be some of it.
Oh,
That
that's all
could
of
be,
it.
that could be some of it.
Because why else would it go down? Their water needs for their
Well, I
businesses
mean,
probably haven't
if,
changed.
also if tourism became more of a year-round,
Would be, the usage would be more
then
consistent.
that would flatten that
seems
out if you didn't
to-
have,
Well, yeah, you'd have to
you know,
look at
your
the
hotel
volumes to figure that out.
capacities and your restaurant capacities were approaching capacity in the wintertime as well.
Could be a combination.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah, so I'm not sure why they're seeing that happen, but it used to be that single-family peaked more than multifamily. And so in our last rate iteration, multifamily service charges were lower.
Yeah.
And now Sanjay said they're just not seeing that differentiation as much anymore.
Again, I was conservation.
So that was one of the interesting components of this, and I don't know, I can make it a little bit larger so that people can actually see those numbers. Come on.
Yeah, thank you. I believe you to do that.
You're like, why are you dealing with that little small screen?
Probably because you just crashed your computer trying to do the other.
Trying to do the other way. So that was an interesting, what?
That didn't work.
There we go. So that was an interesting differentiation. The other thing that we're seeing here is in the past, since, what did we say, 2012?
Oh, well, we had different rates?
We had
Yeah.
actually changed our single-family residential fixed service charge to be kind of a consistent from 5/8 inch to 3/4 inch to 1 inch. Sanjay and Kevin are recommending that if we're going to modify service charges based on meter size for other customer classes, then we need to do the same for single-family residential.
That's fair.
That's part of that fairness and equity. So we started to get a little bit concerned here when we were looking at this, because that means a significant increase for residential customers, single-family residential customers who have larger meters. There are not a whole lot of them out there, there's about 300. So we sat down as a group and tried to identify why did they have larger meters in the first place, and what could be done to help mitigate that impact for them. And at some point in our history, the district was installing 1 inch meters for residential homes on larger, I don't know, it was larger lots or just older homes.
I think it was just a brief time, and
Where-
not sure, that little
where
subdivision
that-
type thing.
Yeah, in our history, we were putting in a 1 inch meter. The little 3/4 inch meters, Taj thinks that there was simply a period of time where the 3/4 inch was the same cost as a 5/8 inch meter. So the district said, well, let's put in the larger meter if it's the same cost.
I think we have actually a physical 1 inch meter and we're charged for a 5/8.
You are?
Yeah,
That's the way it has been in the past.
yeah,
And Sanjay's recommending that change. Now, do you have a 1-inch meter?
I think so, yeah.
Do you remember why?
Well, the water was allocated to these lots probably the better part of 20 years ago.
Yeah,
So, and my home was not built until 3 years ago. So the water meter was there all along. There was 5 water meters put in for that little development that we're in.
now, do you have a separate fire service, or is the 1-inch to accommodate
It
fire flow?
accommodates fire.
Okay, we do have a handful of customers like that. When those subdivisions were put in, the fire department said, here's our standard
1 inch.
for installing these
Yeah.
private fire services. We're gonna just give you a 1-inch
Gotcha. That's probably-
water line
Right.
to accommodate not only your regular water use, but also fire flow. But what that means for those customers is, they're looking at a substantially larger fixed service charge. So we'll be coming to the board with
How to deal with that.
how to deal with that.
But they're not paying the service charge for
They're
a
not
fire
paying a fire
meter,
service
like
charge.
the majority of people do.
Right.
That
Fire
alone is
protection.
higher than a 5/8
Mhm.
and a fire service charge.
Yeah.
combined.
Yeah, because the fire service charge is about 18. Even
Okay.
when you add that to this,
Oh, okay.
it still,
So
it still doesn't put us there. So we're trying to develop remedies for that, because we realize that's an area of concern probably to not only the board, but a lot of our customers. So, the differences you can see are those differences that I showed you here. Multifamily service charges will be coming up a little bit. As you get to the larger meters, they'll be coming up a lot of bit. Commercial's an interesting entity. We discovered that some of the service charges are
Can you
increasing,
let them in?
and then all of a sudden, when you get to a 4-inch meter, or what is it, are they all increasing? No. One of them in here was decreasing.
That one.
That one's decreasing, that one's decreasing, and these are decreasing. But all of a sudden, when you get up to the larger meters, they're increasing. And that's a difference in the meter equivalency table that Raptelis used over the last rate consultant. Everybody's just got a slightly different way of working. And then, of course, irrigation, a little bit lower in the smaller meters. And then, once again, as you get up to these larger meters, they go up quite a bit. The inclining tiered, I'll let Sanjay go through all of this at the meeting on the 18th, but the inclining tiered rates, they're recommending we go from a 4-tier rate structure to a tier 2, or 2-tier rate structure, with 6 units being the tier threshold. And 6 units equates to 2,300 acre feet a year, which is the sustainable pumping, or pre-recovery pumping goal, correct? That we've used in our past studies. Last,
Yeah.
was the, where did it,
It's multiple documents.
multiple documents, but that's where we have documented what that pre-recovery pumping goal would be. So that's what they used as a baseline for what would be sustainable use, while still allowing some aquifer recovery. And then anything over that is not as sustainable without some sort of water reliability piece like a supplemental supply.
Leslie, this seems a bit at odds with his thinking on, last time we had a conversation with him about CustomerSelect. He wanted a large series of very finely tuned levels. Here, he's looking for 2.
Right,
That's
right.
quite.
And I think it's just, they've worked with other agencies in the past, and everybody's got their justification for their tiers, and
Yeah.
a lot of them have different water supply sources coming in and different ways to justify the tiers. After kind of sitting down and getting to know this agency a little bit more, and what we're dealing with in terms of water sources and our cost structure, they were the ones to go ahead and recommend that they felt we could justify a two-tier
Yeah.
system.
And the customer select, you select a level and you're
Yeah.
kind of locked into.
That's a capacity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so
Yeah.
this one, you could control by water usage, so to speak.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the sort of the philosophy of how you charge is quite dissimilar between the two.
Well, capacity's captured in the fixed
And
fee,
the meter, yeah.
yeah, in this model.
Can I ask you a question? Just a clarification?
Sure.
Yeah, is that, if I understand what I see here, the rate for the first 6 units is a little less than $5.
Yeah.
And then for the 7th unit, it jumps up to $28.71.
Well, for the 6th unit, anything under 6,
For the 6th unit?
yeah, actually it'll go to 0 to 5.99, because we
I see,
read our meters in cubic feet.
right.
So anything from 0 to 5.99 would be $4.97.
So
Anything
you
over
can pay
6
more
or
for the
over.
6th unit than you
Right.
pay for all the first 5 together.
Right.
Okay.
The-
What percentage of our users now, our single-family home users, would fall in that tier one
I mean, everybody
or
does the
tier
same thing.
two?
Well, I think that we have about 94% or 97% of our customers that use less than 12
Well, they
units.
don't go up 7 times.
That use less than 12 units.
Okay.
So a large majority of our customers
Well,
are
Sanford-
within the
Guys.
6-unit threshold.
And residential use is at least 85% of total use.
Okay.
The rest is commercial and dedicated irrigation.
And so, what I'm looking at is what percentage would be in tier two? Would the majority be in tier two?
No,
The majority would be in tier
one.
one. Okay.
Yeah.
And even people that are quote in tier 2, their first 6 units would be
Right.
tier 1.
Okay.
So if they use 7 units, there'd be 6 at tier 1
6, okay.
and 1 at tier
Okay.
2.
Is there a total revenue simulation associated with these rates? Did he do a revenue simulation?
Yes.
Well, they're based on the
The
cost.
need.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but the question I have is, what does Bruce Daniels' bill look like? Old race, new race?
Yeah, he did some scenarios of average bills. Now, I do want to point out that right now, our rates were at $6.90 a unit, up to 3.99 units.
Mhm.
Then at 4 units, they went to 9.11. And then that went up to 7.99. At the 8-unit mark, they jumped up to 2101. And at the 14-unit mark, they jumped up to 4401.
Right.
So the 2871 is vastly lower than our tier 4 in the past, which was 4401. It's very close to what our tier 3 is now,
But you're getting more units at tier 1,
but you're getting more units.
so
at
more
tier
people
one.
are gonna fall in the tier 1.
Yeah, based on the input from the committee and the board, remember you did that survey and you said, what are your values and conservation rate tie? This is a very strong conservation-oriented structure with a bright line in the center.
Okay.
Well, except for someone who's using 200 units, and we've had some, they're gonna save a lot of money, because they won't have any at 44.
At the very top.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's why it's important to know what a typical, single-family dwelling unit looks like at this level, that level, and so on.
You could do 2 curves here.
Mhm.
1 unit, 2 unit, 3, 4, and it'll go, like this, and so some will, wherever you are, some will be higher and some will be lower.
Yeah.
We'll be able to show that to people, because
Mhm.
this doesn't mean anything to the average consumer.
No, but I wanted you guys to take a look at it because it is a little different than what we've seen in the past.
Yeah.
It is actually, Sanjay did point out though, because we were recently challenged on our rates, we had to do away with tier 2. So now we go from tier 1 to tier 3, tier 1 being 690 and tier 3 being 2101. So that jump is not far off of where Sanjay said we might wind up with this. It's an interesting dilemma. I think staff was a little shocked to see it that big a differential, but it's the way rates are developed. I mean, you take your cost buckets and you identify your cost buckets and you apply them to each of those. I mean, you can see for tier one, it's your supply and delivery costs that are driving the cost of that tier. But when you get to tier two, it's not only supply and delivery, which we still have to do, but it's also water reliability. And so that's kind of what's driving that cost differential. And it's interesting, and it's gonna probably engender some questions by the board, and it may engender some discussion and some recommendations for revisions. So once again, this is preliminary. This isn't the rates that are locked in at this point. We're still looking at what the rate consultant is advising and listening to the board make their best recommendations. The uniform rate is actually lower. It's $9.52 under this rate plan. Under our current rate plan, it's $10.40. So it's kind of like you said, it's kind of like all over the place. For a single family bill, at 2 units, you'd see the rates just about exactly where they are now. At 5 units, you'd see them a little bit lower. 7 units, the proposed bill's a little higher. It gets a little higher for 9 and 12 units. But then, once you start getting up, like you said, to some of the larger water uses, then that starts to come down.
Savings are significant.
Yeah.
Is that higher tier now, that the third and fourth tier that we have now is at a much higher rate than this current tier two?
So switching hats and looking at it from the district's point of view, what does this do to revenue?
What is what?
What does this do to revenue?
Well, the revenue should be whatever we think our expenses are.
Yeah, they've backed all this out
Yeah.
based on what our revenue needs are.
Well, and are you talking about revenue volatility? That's an interesting thought, because as Ron's pointed out, that differential is a pretty stark line in the sand.
Strong
What does that do to
conservation.
customer behavior?
For example,
Yeah,
if you're way above 35, this would encourage you to use even more, because you're not paying nearly as much as you were before.
But that's a much smaller.
Small
Very
fraction.
small amount of
fraction, right,
customers
right.
but,
are that high.
but the proposed, all,
It's usually leaks.
except for the lowest tier, all the new rates create less revenue per household.
Well, now remember, we're recovering less off the volumetric side.
Right, okay, thank you.
And these
Okay.
do not have the increase, you're still comparing apples to apples.
Slightly
Yeah,
less.
okay, gotcha, thank you.
And the percentages between the,
We're going from 33% fixed to 40% fixed.
so it's not a huge difference.
So we're
but-
recovering more on the fixed charge side of it, which is a little more stable, and less on the, but still, yeah, I mean, still the bulk of our revenue is on the commodity side. So I think this is what you were asking for, John. In this scenario, the highest percentage of our customers would see no change or less. They'd see no change or their bills would go down. A little over 20% would see bills increase up to $5. And then, 12% would see a $5 to $15 increase. Almost none would see a 15 to 25, and then you'd see some that would see a little more significant increase. So, in terms of revenue stability, Raftellus is making a couple of recommendations. Maybe up the rate stabilization reserve is one of their recommendations. The other one is to perform a sensitivity analysis to see what kind of customer shift in behavior we get with that bright line in the sand, so to speak. So it's interesting, like I said, it's very preliminary at this point. It's the board's first look at it. And then the board will provide their input, and Raftellus will go back and make any revisions. The other one we had them look for is what happens if we just put everybody on a uniform rate. and didn't do 2 tiers. It doesn't send the conservation signal that we would like to send to our customers as much, I don't think. But they're still being charged based on the amount of water they use. And that's where, again, that kind of benefits your higher users. Your lower water users see an increase in their bill. And then your higher water users start to see that bill decrease. So I don't know whether that's an option to consider or not. But you wouldn't see any of the higher increases that we were seeing on the greater than $35, but you'd see more people that were having 0 to 15% increase, or $0 to $15 increases in their monthly bill.
Did they look at taking out the volume component altogether?
And just, well, that's kind of what
That's
Customer
Customer
Select
Select.
is, right?
Kind of, sort of, but, you know, there was one, we talked very, very early on about, like over a year ago, about just a flat rate for everybody. And you could, you could do it with Customer Select, but Customer Select could have modified that principle.
But I think her concern with that was there's no conservation signal in that whatsoever. There are small water mutuals that do just charge a flat, every connection has a flat charge, but there's no incentive by anybody to use less water.
And that fixed amount would be pretty high.
It would be
Yeah.
pretty high.
Yeah.
So for example,
Absolutely.
people who have vacation homes would scream bloody murder, because, you know, they're paying, you know, fairly large amount, and they're not using
Not
any water at
using it
all.
Or even
Yeah,
our various lowest users.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, we
they're-
have a lot more low users that, yeah, it would be.
I mean, it's a concept, I mean, it's all push-pull, right? Each structure has its pros and cons.
Yeah, this example that we're seeing, which year is this for in the rate increase?
This is just, it's not looking at rate increases at all.
No, not this one, but the rates, you know, where the tier 1 is 0 to 5.99 units, and you projected the water bills.
That's without any rate increase.
That's before,
Yeah,
The-
that's
the
just,
10,
that's
10,
just
8,
using our current revenue need.
Let's
so
look at
that's
the new
just
tier
today.
structure.
That's
So
just looking at what happens today if we were just change tier trust, and just change the tier
I
structure.
see.
You came in late, Scott, but what this is doing is trying to compare apples to apples. As soon as you move too many variables, you can't get a good perspective on how it changes relative, or how it is relative to what we have today.
So the rate increases for Pure Water Soquel don't show in that example?
No rate increases for
At
any of
all,
our
for
activities, any of our service or anything.
But
Yes,
it's,
that
I mean, it's interesting in this day and age, Prop 218 is really driving what agencies can use to establish tiers. And for a number of agencies, they are able to establish tiers because they have different water sources. They may have, some water's groundwater, some water is from a reservoir, some water is purchased from a wholesaler outside of their area. So each of those water supplies has a different cost to it. And so they can set their tiers accordingly. But the regulatory environment is really kind of, I don't wanna say limiting agencies, but it does kind of narrow your rate setting options. This one would be fairly defensible because we do have a groundwater overdraft situation. So if your tiers are established on what we can reasonably pump without doing more harm, and then what we pump that is contributing to the overdrafted aquifer, I think that's probably a fairly legally defensible position. But
I think the other thing laid in here too is how much water you actually use versus what is your potential to use. And the demand you're making on the system as a possibility.
right.
Right now,
Which
we're
is-
in Customer Select.
Which hasn't been captured on an inclining tier before. So that, it's interesting, I don't know what's gonna, I don't know where it's gonna go from here, you know, we'll see where the board, provides input and what Raftellus is able to accommodate and.
It's a very zen situation, is the way it translates.
Yeah, it is, it's been an interesting exercise, but, they did, private fire service charges, calculated those, and they're all projected to go down, so. Or at least down using our current revenue need. So then they took a look at CustomerSelect, and we remember that Sanjay was recommending that we do narrow plan widths, and that when a customer exceeded their selected plan, they would get bumped up to a higher plan. And then the question for the team became, what policy do you set in terms of how long they can stay in that higher plan before they can come back down? Do we go 3 months and then let them come back down? Do we go 6 months and then let them come back down? Or do we lock them in for a year? So those kind of policy decisions inform what CustomerSelect rates would look like. Sanjay went ahead and ran 3 different rate tables. One if we allowed customers to switch after 3 months, one if we allowed them to switch after 6 months, and one if we allowed them to switch after 12 months. The shorter the period of time that you lock them into a plan, the more volatile the revenue stream becomes, and so the cost for that increases. And we asked them to put this together. He's just kind of going through all of the different policy decisions that have been made up to this date. But he put together 3 different tables for us to take a look at. He established the plan cost by using a peaking factor. So for each plan, 0 to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you know, we had 2-unit plans. For each one of them, he assigned a peaking factor and used that peaking factor to differentiate the cost between plans. This has never been done. It's a theoretical rate structure, so I don't think a consultant has ever actually taken it this far. So whether that's the right method to use or not remains to be seen. I don't know if anybody has recommendations on a different way to do it, but this is what Sanjay used. And so if you had CustomerSelect plans and the customers were locked in for 12 months before they could switch out of that higher plan, your costs are on the right-hand side there. So a customer using a 2-unit plan would pay a flat $13.66 a month. Customer using an 8-unit plan would pay a flat $62.13 a month. These were all lower across the board.
Looks that way to me.
Yeah.
Than where
Yeah.
we currently sit, I think. But, you know, I mean, would a customer be comfortable being locked in for 12 months before they could switch, even if they were paying less than under our current rate structure? I don't know. We don't know that. If you look at the comparison between 12, 6, and 3 months, he's got he actually did a bill count here too, I didn't notice that. But he's got,
That's 3.
What's the bill
So
count?
there's 12,
this
6,
is,
and
this
3.
is if you had, 3 months.
What did
You touched it.
Don't that, yeah.
That's the one.
So this is if you had, you were locked in for 3 months, right, before you could switch. This is if you were locked into the higher plan for 6 months, and this is if you were locked in for 12. And you can see, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of difference, like no difference at the 0 units, but,
Because it's just the 440.
right. So that means if you've got a vacation home and you're not using it,
That's what you're paying.
then you pay $440 a month. Until such a time as you use water, and then you'd be locked in wherever you landed. So you can see that the cost differential here becomes more expensive, the more flexibility you build into that plan. So the more often we allow them to switch, the higher the rates would become. And comparing where we sit now on our rates, I'm trying to think an 8 units of use puts you right about where? You know, off the top of your head?
With our current rates,
With our current.
what we're billing today, with no tier two?
Just in general, just not, just,
I
That puts you about
oh my
80.
gosh, you don't know how many
And
numbers I looked at.
Like 7 units puts you about 88
Yeah.
to $80 to $88 a
Yeah.
month, I
sounds
think.
about right.
Yeah,
So it's comparable probably to where we are now, maybe a little less expensive,
yeah.
even on the 3-unit plan. But you've got that revenue stability.
I just think the narrow tiers make it very hard to explain why this isn't just a volume plan.
As opposed to what would you recommend?
I would do much wider.
Why?
Yeah. I've been saying that all along.
Okay, I am. I just wasn't sure if you were headed.
Well, I thought you would have memorized it.
See, and I
John's
think
John's a
Sanjay,
broken record.
Sanjay had concerns about that being fair and equitable.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is, to me, this is, you might as well just stick with a tiered rate plan and go back to, 4 tiers, because that's kind of what it looks like.
Well, we can't go to 4 tiers.
Well, whatever, it
This is not even close to
That's
4
not an
tiers.
option.
Well, this is like 30 tiers, 20 tiers, whatever, 15 tiers.
No, it's just a multiplier.
Well, but yeah.
Well,
And if you have large groups, so 0 to 6, you charge 60, like, what is it, like $44? People that use 2 units, that's not fair. You have to be, I know you don't care about fair, but we have to be fair and equitable. So we have a lot of very low users,
Yes.
a lot.
Well, fine, you can do that, but what did you do with them in the tiered rates? I mean, you really, the tiered rate, you have a very high meter charge in the new plan that you're talking about. So they're gonna get hit one way or another with something that doesn't look like it's fair. And so, I mean, to me, fair is the fact you get any water at all around here is a pretty good deal.
But there's not that much of an increase, really.
With those rates, the service charge goes up, but the per unit charge is going down
Yeah.
from current.
But what I'm saying, when you have a very low usage person and you're charging $30 for a meter, the $4 for water doesn't seem to mean very much.
Yeah.
It's the $30 per meter that you're really getting hit with, which is actually correct. I mean, it should be maybe $50 for
Yeah,
that meter.
that's the thing,
And it's,
fixed cost.
I think when we were talking about CustomerSelect in the theoretical, without seeing what
Yeah,
the rates would be, I mean, you make certain assumptions on what that would look like, I think. And now that you see what the rates look like, then you're thinking, okay, I mean, is it fair and equitable for somebody who can get water service, who has access to the system, but maybe doesn't use it very much?
Particularly when most of the costs are fixed.
Right.
So we still have to put in pipes and pumps and
yeah.
And then
tanks
are they
and
paying their
wells
fair
and-
share of that
Because it's a
system
real disparity
cost?
there. The proposed tiers rate for 0 is $36.57. It's a lot of money compared to $4.40,
Well, but,
right?
yeah, I'm not sure how we got the 4.4.
I don't know either.
I mean, it doesn't make sense. to
I
me.
think it's just based on that peaking ratio.
No, but
right?
Well,
Well,
then that's the wrong way to do it, because this system has got to include the $35 for the meter, otherwise it's not a capacity charge. If we're not charging for capacity here, we're charging for volume,
Right?
and that's not how it's
So
supposed to work.
this is an entirely we've moved to an entirely
Exactly,
volumetric
exactly.
system.
And that was always the
Exactly.
problem with narrow tiers. If it's gonna be a capacity charge, make it a capacity charge.
Now,
This is wrong.
I'd be equal to this if you took all those things and added the $36 to all of them.
Or something like that, yeah.
Some number.
Yeah, because otherwise it doesn't work. It doesn't do what we set out to do.
Yes.
We set out to keep our bills pretty much even and our revenue pretty much even, and you're not doing that with this system, the way he's got it modeled. It is dead wrong. This is not what we intended to do.
I'm failed to follow. I might just be a little bit slow, but I don't see how this is a volumetric.
Because it changes with volume, it does not change with capacity.
Each
And-
person's not paying their share, basically,
Of the
of
capacity.
the fixed costs.
But isn't that built into that?
No,
No.
not when you're charging $4.40 versus $37.
But they're not using any capacity when they're using zero.
That's not true.
But you're paying for the
The
capacity
capacity
that
is
you
there.
could theoretically
Fixed.
use, not what you're actually
But is
using.
that, does that become a
You have to
fixed
pay for
meter
the
charge
system.
then?
Brian,
I see.
Not using versus what's available is two different
It's gotta
questions.
be embedded.
I think what you see is, you're seeing a novel structure that the committee has researched and gone at, and it may need, that it needs more work to go on.
yeah, I would not want this to go.
Okay, well,
Well, it will go to the, it
It's
will go
going
to the board. But-
If they were to sign off on this, it would be absolutely dead wrong.
I
Sorry.
think then, I think then that needs to be
you should.
discussed,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah,
we're,
bring that
Quite a
up.
ways from
Yeah, we
even the
couldn't
public
initiate
hearing.
this in our March
Yeah,
minutes
we
anyway,
don't-
because
we don't have a
we
public
have to
hearing
wait for our
yet,
new
but-
software, which we're not even getting till May,
Well,
so.
meanwhile,
it wouldn't-
but never mind that,
Yeah.
that's all that,
That's not gonna happen.
That's
all
not
that practical
theory, that's
stuff. What I'm
practice.
looking at is the fact that Raftellus has simply failed to understand what we're trying to do.
well,
Period.
okay, that's
There has to,
an option. I mean, we've devised this rate structure. If we feel that this work isn't reflective of our intent, then do we want to take it to the board?
no.
Not the way it stands. I think it could be totally confusing.
Maybe he just, I don't know, if
That's
he
a-
got
That's a volume
missed
system,
something or.
Leslie. That's straight, that, you might as well charge like 12 cents a gallon and just put it out there and that's what you're gonna do, because that's what that is.
So
Well, it's-
basically, we have like a 90% volumetric with a $4.40 service charge.
I suppose, but that
That's
$4.40
exactly
is meaningless.
That's so small, it's token.
Which
That's the
is,
Santa Cruz.
that's the Santa Cruz model,
Yeah,
10%.
which conversely
Yep.
Yeah,
Sanjay
it's
actually
probably-
did, so.
It's probably even worse.
He did it.
This is probably
Yeah.
like 95%
But
volumetric.
the last time we met, I said, and I will repeat it again, this type of thing, with a very narrow tier structure, okay, or level structure, whatever you wanna call it, is basically a volume system. If you go to a very wide one, if you go too wide, you go into a fixed price system. So you want something that's kind of in between. And if you don't charge a minimum amount, as you do now with your meter charge, if you don't charge a minimum amount for infrastructure, the zero volume user will not add their share to the cost of maintaining the infrastructure of the district. Which is part of, I mean, that's the most important thing you gotta do. The volume will be what the volume is, but you have to pay for the infrastructure, you can't have anything to do with the volume.
No, I absolutely hear what you're saying.
Is this
I
the
do.
only slide you put together on this
On the-
plan? Cause maybe he just left
Take
it
it
out
all
of
out.
that.
No, no.
Okay.
It was his volumetric fractionation he did.
Mm.
Yeah, no, it's
I
all.
mean, that, the 440 doesn't even pay for depreciation for stuff, and
Doesn't pay
and the
anything.
breakage and the repair and,
Doesn't pay Leslie's salary, doesn't pay anything.
I'm not
Well-
even sure it covers the cost to send them
The bill.
a bill.
No. I mean, we pay,
You know,
what's the
or much
smallest
less
meter charge you
maintain
have
their
now?
meter, right?
Yeah.
Cause what did he give us back
oh,
here?
32.95 is single
Okay,
family
so-
residence.
So if you don't charge everybody at least $32.95, you haven't done your job.
There it is, that was it. So, yeah, he's saying that a minimum is $4.97, right? Just to provide a supply and deliver the water.
But that's nothing.
And that doesn't even capture,
No.
the cost to maintain the meter,
Yeah,
or
you can't-
to answer the phone calls, or to send them a bill?
You're gonna, you're gonna get laughed out of the boardroom by me. I mean, that.
Thrown under
This
the bus by my own committee?
This is dead wrong, Leslie.
Run over back.
Let's not embarrass ourselves by putting this to the board.
Well, what's everyone's thoughts on that? I mean, I'm open,
I'd be curious, can you go forward to that where they did actually the breakdown of where that 440, those different customer select charges are coming from? 'Cause I think that's kind of a little bit of the math behind the numbers.
well, this one,
I think
this one?
that one, yeah.
Okay, so let's see, make it a little bigger for us here.
I mean, I don't have a solution or.
Okay, so he is
There's
just
your base.
capturing the customer cost, or what he feels to be the customer cost. No peaking, no supply, no pumping, no base charges.
What's $4.40? Where'd that come from?
I'm assuming the customer cost for meter maintenance and customer service.
That's not what it's supposed to be. We're supposed to be charging
Should be
for
a lot more.
infrastructure. That's what this is about.
So, I'm wondering if Sanjay's argument to this would be the fact that we're talking about a capacity plan here now, where customers are selecting the capacity that they choose to pull off the system.
But we have to charge them for the capacity they select, and this does not do it.
I think maybe the thing to do, I mean, we currently are looking at two things. We're looking at peaking, one's potential for use, and then the supply, your actual use, right? Those two.
Right.
And another component of that is this notion of depreciation or maintenance or whatever. And we actually need to have that in there, because that's a real cost.
Shouldn't that be under the base charge though? I mean, shouldn't
Of the
that?
base charge, I would hope,
Yeah.
would cover that kind of depreciation.
Instead of
and
that being
maintenance.
zero, be $35 and just, you know,
Yeah.
extrapolate it on down the line.
Well, we do have some meetings with Sanjay scheduled with this committee in October.
But you're gonna go to the board next week.
Well, if we decided to say, you know what, we're gonna pull this off the table until the committee can talk to Sanjay and do some give and take and some back and forth on it, I mean, that's an option.
You know, this is, yeah, but that's fine, Leslie, but it seems to me that Sanjay has simply failed to understand what the concept is.
And I don't say you're wrong, John. I don't say you're wrong. Our intent behind this structure and what Sanjay was able to put together, I don't think have actually been in alignment since probably his first set of recommendations. I think when he made those first recommendations, all of a sudden we saw this structure start to deviate from what we had envisioned.
I think it's worth taking to the board, if only to look at the tier four tiers versus 2 tiers.
That part, sure, absolutely. That's-
Oh, no,
that-
yeah, no, I don't
wanna
mean,
talk
I'm
about
just saying the
select.
customer select component.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I-
maybe he has a explanation for, I don't know, don't you
Or
think
do
you
we
should
want,
talk to
do we
him
wanna
first
give
and
our
find
board the
out?
opportunity to kind of
Question him.
I mean,
Question
isn't a
Sanjay
lot
on
of the capacity showing up in the peaking?
Well, but look,
Because that goes pretty high, the more you use, I mean, that's where the bulk of the charges are, is in
Well,
the peaking.
Right, but that's
That's
the demand you place on the system.
Yeah.
That's your peak
But
hour,
that's your-
peak day demand.
But that's what we currently base our service charges on.
And this is the same regardless of what size meter you have, whether you have a 5/8 inch, a 5/8 inch restricted, 1 inch, a 1.5, and on up the line.
No,
Yeah,
it's-
I'm
there's
I'm having
no,
a hard time seeing
single
how this
family
would
over
provide
1
our
inch.
revenue.
You're out of business with this model, the way this is structured. You'll never borrow another dollar from the bank. Because you're not gonna get enough revenue out of this. It's not gonna happen.
well, you can always get enough revenue, just the ratios. But the
Yeah.
thing is the fairness.
Well, it's not just the fairness, it's the whole concept. The whole idea was, we would charge people for a capacity that they plan to use. And when they go over that capacity, we would charge them into a different, we would push them into a different zone. Meanwhile, what this thing does is it charges them for their volume.
But I think the revenue recovery in Sanjay's mind is coming from this factor of locking in.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Right.
that's not gonna work.
So, all of a sudden, you use 6 units, you're a vacation home who's never there, and then all of a sudden you show up for 2 weeks in the summer and you use 6 units. And then you pay the 6-unit plan the rest of the year. I think that's where he's thinking that revenue recovery happens.
I think that's not what we had in mind.
Not what we intended.
I'm not, you know, the summer customers, I mean, that's their own little problem, and as Chris, who hasn't been here for a while, would like to say, if you can afford a summer house, you can afford whatever hotel we wanna charge you. But in the meantime, what we wanted to do was set up a system where, in general, an average customer could expect a pretty much even bill month to month, except when things went crazy in their household. That was the whole idea of the thing. And this, I mean, I don't know what this is. I had this argument with them a long time ago. These narrow bands, you're in a volume situation, and that's not what we had in mind.
Well, it is kind of true in that, you know, if you're in this range somewhere between 10 and 12, yeah, if you use a bit more in the summer, you're gonna pop up to that maybe. But basically, you're gonna stay, you know,
Yeah.
like in there. So it's more so than now, because now every 1/100th of a, you know, HCF means you're gonna be paying more.
Well, see, and I think
It's
this is,
not fixed at all now.
this is where he's got see the bill counts? I think he's estimating how many customers
Following each category.
fall in each category. And you can see that the majority of the customers are definitely in that 4 to 8 unit range probably.
Yeah.
And they probably wouldn't deviate much from that. The other thing though is we're trying to predict customer behavior based on historical response to tiered
Right.
rates.
And translate that into a whole new structure.
Okay, so so in other words, what you're telling me is he's saying that if we stick in that 6, what do you say, 6 to 8 band,
Yeah,
our average bill is gonna be between, what is that, $35 and $62. Is that right?
which is probably what the majority of people are paying, somewhere around.
So how is somebody supposed to figure
$68
this out if they're a customer and they're gonna select it, what are they gonna do?
Well, you've lost that component that Hans liked, where it was, you knew what the bill was every month, right? Because it doesn't take a whole lot to deviate 2
Right,
units.
that's why I wanted the wider bands. See, that's why this looks more like a volume plan.
Right, and Sanjay's thought was it was less fair to the wider the band is what she had. You know,
Because people are paying, if it's 0 to 5,
well, yeah, the wider the band, the
And they're
longer you're
only-
locked in, you know, there's more question, and more stability, you know, it's that yin and yang thing.
If you present this to customers, I mean, just the left-hand side of what this is gonna be, it's very, very hard for them to understand what they ought to be doing. And remember, it's customer select, not utility select, so.
Well, the idea behind it, and I'm not pushing this by any means, is that if we did roll something like this out ever, I would assume we'd run the analytics to say, here's your best
Yeah, of
option,
course.
you know, financially.
Yeah.
We've done the analysis for you and get you there.
Even PG&E will do that for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Based on
maybe what we
usage.
ought to do is have, you know, a typical array of bills set against this model, so people can see what it would look like for a average, whatever that might be, I don't know.
We've kind of done that here with the counts.
Yeah, 6
So for
units
example,
is
look at this
pretty-
one, you know, the 3-month one, 30,000 of our customers would be in that category any particular month.
That's just a bill in a year.
We can expect
But then
30,000 bills at that.
You go to
point.
the 12-month one, and only 18,000 are in that category. Because
Because
a lot of
somebody's
those people
peaked
have
and
been
got stuck
bumped
in a
up.
higher
They've been
plan.
bumped up and stuck there for a whole
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll
So
make that
that's,
wrong.
you get some of that behavior just by looking at the numbers there.
The other way to think of it, for kind of explaining to customers, that they do have some variability. Like if you look at the 6 units, that means that customer will pay $35.55 for 0 to 6 units. That means, and then if you bump up the next year, that means they're paying $62 for 0 to 8. And so that gives them that flexibility. As long as I stay under 8, I know what my bill's gonna be.
I think the big reason for not having that wider range was for conservation purposes, because if the person's only using 5 units and they're from 4 to 8, they say, what the heck, I'll just
Yeah,
use
there's that.
8 units.
Or 7, that would be
Or
safe.
7, yeah.
Okay.
7 would be safe.
Yeah.
All right, I'm wrong.
Well,
No, they're
It's
not,
just a
it's not
choice.
wrong, and
It's
it's
a choice.
just, all
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
choices.
But it's a,
and-
it's a, it's a,
Yeah.
this is a presentation problem.
It's just one of the things that we've worked through,
Yeah.
and, you know, I think that other slide is so confusing that it shouldn't even be shown that this is a slide. It should be-
Which one are we talking about? Maybe we should.
Which one?
That one?
Yeah, this one, yeah. Because the 440 doesn't make any sense at
Yeah,
all.
that's why, that's where I got really confused.
Yeah, I think the next slide is the one that actually,
Well, and remember, Sanjay has gone and kind of done this without any feedback
Yeah.
from
Okay.
anybody, right? I mean, we got to that theoretical, okay, well, we need narrow plan widths and, you know, then we talked about what happens when you exceed your plan is, you know, are you bumped into a tier situation? Are you bumped into a higher plan? Are you charged a penalty? I mean, how does that happen? What are those mechanisms? And so I think Sanjay just took that very conceptual design that we had and
is just showing
tried
the
to
steps.
come up with some sort of methodology to do the rates, because like I said, this has not been done in California before.
Or anywhere.
So, or anywhere,
Yeah,
so
if you-
he's kind of paving, but maybe there's another way to do it.
there's always a zillion ways to do it.
Yeah, I think it's a presentation problem. So if you go back to the slide that we actually seem to understand a little better, this one. If you did something at Buzzley with this slide, like put some yellow bands in it, so you could, you know, have maybe
See
3 or 4
across.
different slides where it
Yeah.
show
That's a
what
good
this would
idea.
be like, the 3 or 4 different classes of customers,
Mhm.
and where they might go from there, might be a much better way to do this. Because the way this is, it's like, you go, huh? And then you look at the next slide and you go, wrong. So, we can take huh and turn it into, oh, I get it. Wrong, I don't know what you're gonna do with that one, but this one can be fixed so you can present it in a way that's much more understandable.
And the administrative costs associated with allowing people to
That's not in here.
change every 3 months as opposed to just letting them do it once a year, I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, that's, Valerie needs to develop a whole lot of interns to do that. You're right, I mean, sure, that's a really big problem, I always thought that.
Well, you could always do this as, rather than have, I have to call in to change. We would reset them to their best thing every 3 months.
Well,
or 6
we also
months.
talked about charging them
We had,
to change.
and we talked about
More
letting them
than
do it,
once,
letting them
yeah.
do it once a year and charge them for any others, and
Right.
again, a zillion choices here.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm just going through a whole kerfuffle with Comcast, which recently imposed a limit on how many terabytes, how many megabytes you could, gigabytes you could download through your TV, your phone.
Yeah.
And it turned out we had an invader on our system. So, they let you go over twice, okay? And after that, you gotta start paying. Well, now that I found the interloper,
That's a leak adjustment policy, huh?
yeah, I'm gonna have to call them. As soon as I'm absolutely sure I've got this straightened out, I'm gonna call them and go, hi, you know, when there's a leak in the water district,
Mhm.
they give me a credit.
You're gonna use us as an example, huh?
Please do.
I'm gonna give
So,
them your name.
I don't know,
I think
this is the first time any of us are getting to kind of see what Sanjay had in mind. I don't know if we want to pull the customer select component at this point and wait till we have an opportunity to sit down with Sanjay and elicit some feedback and some discussion. or if we wanna go ahead and take what we've got and at least keep the board apprised of our progress. Like I said, all of this is preliminary, none of this is,
I would say this, that the last time we talked to the board about CustomerSelect, it was not really well understood as a capacity plan. And I think if we don't fix this slide to show why it's a capacity plan, I don't think they're necessarily gonna get it right away. So I think if you just would fix this slide to make it more illustrative of why it's a capacity plan and why it's not gonna drive the district broke, I think you'll be fine to present it. Maybe you need Sanjay's permission to change the slide, I don't know, but,
well, I don't have the ability to change the numbers, those were
Not
devised by the
numbers.
model.
not, just put some highlights in, put some scenario yellow lines in, you can highlight stuff in yellow on the slide, it's a PowerPoint, right?
Right,
Easy to do.
and Sanjay is waiting for us to provide him feedback on this
Okay,
presentation,
well,
so.
it's not, I think that the analysis is okay, now that I get how the slide works. The slide's not so okay, so we gotta fix the slide to make the analysis.
How would you fix this slide, John?
I would say, excuse me, Becky, I wanna run you down here.
That's fine, thank you.
But we're saying that 6 to 8, for example, is the typical bill, all right? So take 6 and highlight that line yellow. See, this is typically what we would see, so the average bill would be like $66, okay? Then if they went over, they would fall into, you just, with your pointer, go next tier. And then they would stay there for however long we decide to let that happen. And then you can actually make a whole, here's the average stuff. You're not really here and you're not really here.
See how hard that is?
And just do it with colored pencils. I mean, it's like, just, crayons. It's really good. PowerPoint's good that way. It has a whole coloring book you can use, just like, back in school.
Okay,
And that's all you have to do, I think, to make this a little bit clearer.
but then we think we don't want this
I
slide
think
at
we don't
all.
want that slide, because this.
Well, that's just taking the 12 months and putting it in
How
its own
about how he's
slide.
devising, this is actually how he's getting to,
Yeah.
So he's actually got 3 tiers.
well,
What you see on those
more.
other things.
I think they
there's a
go
lot
on,
more.
I think they
Yeah.
go all the way up to 30 units,
Mhm.
or, right, that have increasingly.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
And
the
I
peaking
think,
factor
I
keeps-
think that peaking factor
just
is
keeps
what's
going.
being used to
Keeps going
drive.
up.
See how
You see.
you've got 389 becomes 849, it's because one's divided, or multiplied by 1.13, the other's 1.3, you know what I mean? I think those ratios are what's driving
Yeah,
His-
it's continuation.
and his numbers
It's a
there.
frightening number right there. That'll scare anybody away.
Well, it's a base number from which he multiplies, but
But I think we're even arguing here amongst us that it's not even a base number.
Yeah.
All you're capturing in that is
it's an appropriate base number perhaps, where the other one, I mean,
Process, you know,
you're getting
customer
ranges here.
service.
And none of them really reflect, nobody's structure I've ever seen reflects the pure cost of service. Let me make a suggestion. So, a couple things. One, I think just getting it out there, we can leave that one table out if it's confusing, there's no harm in that, I would think. But in just furthering the discussion, 2 big things come to mind for me, CustomerSelect, and I just want to put it out there. Number one, the customer is not in quite a position unless they run out and read their meter or get a special device to see where they're at in that CustomerSelect plan, whether they're gonna go over or not. Where they will be if we go forth with AMI, they'll be able to have that. So I think as far as timing, that's a big thing. And then 2, this rate structure, we're the first out the gate. As the general manager, that makes me a little bit nervous. I'd like to see it fleshed out more. Sanjay presented at Aqua and things like that. Not saying it's, and hear more input, just like you're hearing now, flesh it out. Not that it couldn't be adopted and maybe implemented later, but we may just be a little bit ahead of the curve.
You also, actually, Ron, from what I understand from you guys, Valerie especially, you're ahead of where you could possibly do this anyway.
Yes, we are, as
From the
far as we're getting a whole new
From a
system.
software, we're
Yeah, I
getting
mean,
a new
we're-
software
so
system.
we've got a lot of balls
This
in,
is
yeah.
a conversation continuation.
I think so. I mean, I think we've moved the ball. When I first saw this, I was like, wow, you know, with a few things. I thought it was very impressive.
In fact, in some ways, we're not even finished. One of the things we talked about was a credit. If you're in this
Yeah,
range,
yeah.
a credit if you didn't
Yeah.
use all of your range. In fact, he was saying you have to have that credit to be 218
Yeah,
compliant, and that's not in
You
here.
may need to.
So we're not done.
Yeah. And at these aqua
I mean,
meetings,
I don't want that credit, but that's not.
Well,
yeah.
we have to offer it to you.
Yeah, it might be a credit that goes to another, you know, could help somebody else. But,
That money should go to pay for.
yeah, you might have to,
Ryan's going
yeah, he's
no.
going, he's kicking me.
No.
Ryan's like, stop it!
Ryan's okay with it.
218, no.
But and for the sake of, you know, we usually like to put it out there and get feedback and further in the cause, so to speak, and
I just actually hearing you say that you didn't want your little credit. I wonder if that is a mechanism for, like a low-income rate assistance program.
yeah.
Because that would be a donation to that program.
Yeah, and I have the concern that the credit could cause the reverse to happen, you know, it's not, people don't
People
see
see
it
the
as,
credit,
yeah, and there's some studies to indicate that could be the case in itself, so there's a lot to flesh out, is the point here.
So I misunderstood what Sanjay was going to be able to do for us on this. I thought what we were going to wind up with at the end of this game was 2 administrative records with 2 sets of rates. What Sanjay thought we were ending up with at the end of this game was 1 administrative record, and the board would have made a decision on one rate structure or the other at that point. So he's only prepared to present and complete 1 administrative record,
Which is the 2 tiers or the uniform rate.
which is, no,
Or the
inclining
customer
tiered or customer select.
Or uniform, if the board picks uniform.
So, I don't think we're in a position to
this.
adopt customer select yet, so I think our administrative record is going to have to be an inclining tiered system, whatever that winds
I
up
think
being.
a
but-
couple of months ago, we made a decision.
We did, I was kind of hoping that I was gonna be able to come down to the finish line here with both, and then I would just sit on the administrative record for customer select until such time as we could implement it.
Well, Valerie, what do you say to that? No, seriously.
She's my boss.
No, well.
So I'm not talking against her.
Well, but you own the steering wheel, so how does that work?
I think what Ron said, I agree with Ron. We get AMI, people have apps on their phones and emails to tell them what their usage is daily. And it's just, people are they have so much more information. So that this works
Like
easier
cell
for
phones,
customers.
you
So
know,
you're getting that
data
text
is-
It
alert
would
that
certainly
says
make
you're
the
gonna
rollout
exceed
much
your
easier.
plan limit.
Well, yeah,
Because
and,
otherwise there'd be a ton of confusion and.
yeah, well, and people can monitor it better. I mean, I get that 75% data, I'm texting all my kids saying, knock it off, you know, or you owe me $20. I mean, that's
Using the
like
data,
a
tell
lot
them
of
not to use
knowledge. Hush. So I think having it with the MI is good. Our new software system, I think, can manage this, but our current software system cannot.
So you're talking when?
At least 2 years.
It depends on what happens with AMI, but we're looking at 2 years.
You might even envision having a tiered rate structure and then showing, okay, we're going to this method, this is what your bill, you know, how it looks or something, you know?
Yeah, the truth is, if you could roll this out over the course of your 2 years and say, we're looking at a system that would make your bill look like this, as an outreach thing over that time, and use that as a training period. But I think you need to continue with the conversation with the board in order to make sure that we can have that
Yeah.
time to do that. And then work with, Melody and her team to get the outreach going and the training.
In legal, make sure that this all meets because it's
Yeah.
such a evolving landscape right now with the 218. I think that'd be prudent.
I want to point out that there's something else that's happened here.
Uh-oh.
I just want to point out,
Yeah.
here's what we looked at for the inclining rate. I assume that's the numbers we have.
Right, yes.
And so you could take these rates and make them be customer select. So this is at 0, this is at 2, 4, and then you could either have 3 month or 6 month or 12. He's induced a completely new pricing scheme. So this pricing scheme is very different than that pricing scheme. And it doesn't need to be. You could use these
Oh, I see what
numbers
you're saying.
for a customer select.
Yeah, to divide by whatever and come back
Yes.
out.
It's try to give a
Because,
different.
here's 0, here's 2, here's 4, and the difference is that, if you use this as an inclining rate, then whatever you use in between will get,
Yeah.
rather than being fixed at 0, fixed at 2, fixed
And
at
that's
4.
kind of what I thought Sanjay was gonna do.
That's what I thought we were doing
Yeah,
too.
I thought we would see, like, this is Harvey Schmidt, and he's got,
Right,
whatever many units, and this is what his bill would be here, this is what his bill would be there,
right.
and then show that. That's
Well,
what we need,
but
that's what we need to have.
I think the tiered rates are without this concept of locking in.
Right, but he's
Right.
just saying
Well,
you can
yeah.
kind of use
Right.
that logic
Right.
over here.
Now, the tier rates, that does or does not include the meter.
Yes, it does.
That does.
It
That
does.
includes
It's got
service
that
It's
fixed
charge.
charge.
it's the whole
Fixed fee
bill,
charge
service
cost.
charge and the tiered
And the
rate.
tier, okay.
It's the whole cost of the bill, yeah.
But we don't know what size pipe they got.
Well, we know what size meter they have.
I think it's 5/8 or 3/4.
Yeah, see,
Yeah,
he's
5/8.
put it, oh, I see what you're saying. I think
Yeah,
he's
it's
assuming
not
5/8
that
inch
long,
meter.
Yeah, 90%
I think it
is
probably
5/8.
is 5/8, yeah.
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 Which is something we could do anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, because
That-
if you had a pipe this big, you're still gonna flush your toilet, twice a day. And so you're not gonna be using, 100 times more water just because you have a bigger pipe.
I must say, I'm glad you and I had the same misunderstanding of what Sanjay was gonna do here.
So, we go ahead and take this to the board as continuing our
straighten out-
theoretical discussion?
So we straighten out that table, a little bit more illustrative graphics, and get
Okay.
rid of the other table.
Now, I'm assuming, this is not my presentation, I'm assuming Sanjay has an explanation as to where he got on this stuff and why he got there?
Yeah, there's a visual quality to that
This one
that
right here?
table that is just upsetting as hell,
Okay,
and you really gotta get rid of that. And I know
It's not
Sanjay's analytical skills may be fine, but I'm not sure his presentation skills are very good.
do you think this is something the board's gonna wanna see?
What does it mean?
I mean, I don't wanna yank out something that has merit from a board
We could take
perspective.
it as a backup, and if they start diving into this question, we can pull it up. But what's it get you beyond the other one?
The interesting thing about this is it shows the various factors and how they're
Uh-huh.
broken up. And that's a detail, but I don't think that's what you start with.
Not all
Okay.
data is informative.
So make this a backup
I
site?
think so, like I
Yes.
said, if somebody wants to go, what's the peaking or supply component?
Is this,
I have no idea.
That's the basis, because it's showing, everything is based on a peaking factor that is volumetric.
Yeah, and I think that
That's
should
what-
say example
Toss
too,
it?
because it makes it look
Yeah,
like there's
and
three.
that-
Have it, et cetera, below the C or something.
okay, so go ahead and take these two slides and have Sanjay put them as backup slides.
Yes,
Okay.
agreed.
And that backup slide, I think what's missing about that is you get this next one, the other backup, is you get the illusion there's only three plans.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
maybe
It's
have a
ongoing.
discussion, ongoing.
Okay, all right. I can advise him that direction. He had some questions, that I think he encountered while he was going through the exercise of factors to consider. Is it appropriate to charge a customer based on prior behavior under a different rate structure? Was, I think, one of his questions.
Why is that a question? I'm not sure what it's trying to get at.
Well, he's saying, I mean, for example, we have this 12-month program, right? So if you bump up this summer, then you're in that bump for the next 12 months. So when you start the program, should you look back at what you used this summer and automatically bump you up?
Didn't you decide to implement this in the summer so that wouldn't happen?
Yeah, I
Well,
thought I thought that was a reasonable,
even if we started in the summer, someone may have had a family reunion in March.
Oh, tough.
But I don't think that's what
Well,
he
that's
means.
what-
I think he means, is it appropriate to charge a customer in CustomerSelect based on what they used when they were under a 4-tier rate? Because their consumption could be completely different. 'Cause
Would it though? I mean,
it could be.
Well, yeah, I thought
I
we
think
were
our
gonna let them come
consumption
out
is
the
based
gate.
on lifestyle, not, you know.
You can't
Sometimes.
cannot accommodate 14,500 individual situations piece by piece. Cannot be done.
We do try.
So I think he had another question here. Customer may have one bill period where they are bumped into a higher plan and pay for the water reliability. Okay, so he has assessed a water reliability charge, I'm assuming, at anything over 6 units, just like he did for the tiered rate structure. So he really, I'm not sure he has looked at this rate structure as an independent rate structure. I think he's taken his methodology for a tiered rate structure and tried to apply it to this rate structure. But he's saying that, for example, customer A uses 4 units, but in 1 month uses 7 units. Is it appropriate for this customer to pay for the water reliability plan even though they have changed their behavior?
May I ask a question? What is meant by the water reliability factor? What does that mean?
I think that means providing a sustainable basin sustainability, water reliability.
So that would factor in the cost of the supplemental supply.
Conservation, anything probably you see in this
Prevention,
room
seawater
would be a water
treatment.
reliability
Okay.
thing. Yeah.
So the money we're spending on transfers this winter, or even the studies that we're doing for transfer,
Oh.
maybe,
Right.
yeah,
The MGA,
yes.
all of that is based on sustainability work, so.
What is
And
it
it's all
what
water
about the water supply
reliability.
and delivery charge? Isn't that what the infrastructure is?
That water supply and delivery charge, that would be the, that, when he was talking about those cost components, remember he had base cost, which is the delivery. Water supply is the cost for us to pump
Pump it
it
and treat it.
and treat it, yeah. So, he obviously has some questions about this plan that came to the forefront as he was devising the rates that I think he'd like to get insight on, but,
I think that comes down to how do you come up with the cost of access, ultimately? Because that's really what we're talking about.
yeah. Okay, so I will have them take those 2 slides, make them backup slides. And then this will come back to the board on the 18th. If anybody's interested in being there and providing input, you're more than welcome. Like I said, this was not my presentation, this was Sanjay's, so I imagine as he goes through it, he'll be doing a lot more clarification and explaining of his methodology that I simply don't have the resources to expound upon, so.
Okay, keep the swimming going.
Okay,
And I really like this does not use the new rates. It uses apples to apples.
right, we're
So we can
just
actually see
looking at
the-
changes in structure
The
at
tier
this point.
changes and the customer select by itself changes.
Yeah, yeah.
Because otherwise it'd just be too much mess going
You
on.
can't do it on your head. You know, it's just-
Okay, well, thanks everyone for your input, and we'll continue to provide input at the board level, and we'll see where we get.
And we adjourn 6 months early.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.